This story starts in hell right after a bloody war has just ended. The battlefield is littered with corpses, but right in the middle of the mess lies an old man and an old woman. These two aren't just survivors, they're legends. The battle master and the great sage, the strongest pair to ever battle hell and win. Suddenly a blinding light appears before them, and from it a divine voice praises them for their efforts. In the midst of the bright light, a beautiful goddess descends and thanks the old couple for saving the world from the devil, Beelzebub. The goddess then offers them a reward for their heroism, but the old couple refuses, saying all they want is to fight an even stronger opponent. But then the goddess reminds them of something they don't have, and that's children to pass down their overpowered abilities. The couple admits they regret it, but then point out that no one had ever survived their brutal training. The goddess then decides to grant the old couple a special favor. With a snap, divine power washes over them, their wrinkles vanish, their strength surges, and their youth is restored. The goddess cheerfully explains that for tonight, she's even erased the reason they couldn't have children, and then tells them to do their best tonight. Later that night, nature takes its course, and for the first time in 30 years, the couples make sweet love. Months later, they welcome a newborn son named Yuan. Time skips forward 5 years, and Yuan now stands ready for training. The great sage urges him to try casting, and the boy focuses, forming a magic circle as energy gathers in both hands. As he unleashes his power, flames and wind burst forth, and just like that, the young prodigy is already pulling off magic feats most adults couldn't dream of. Later that night, while Yuan snores in bed like nothing happened, Grandma discusses with her husband concerning Yuan's magic, and the old sage admits the boy has some huge potential. Grandma nods, agreeing she felt the same way. She reflects on her own training session with Yuan the day before. That sunny afternoon, she had instructed Yuan to do as she said as a massive boar charged towards him. So per his ma's instruction, Yuan sidesteps the beast with precision and then uppercuts it to the sky to be a kite for the moment. Grandma was impressed, but she wasn't about to let the boy get cocky. Instead of praising him too much, she told him even Rugrats could pull off that trick. Back in the present, the parents admit the truth that their miracle boy might one day surpass them. But with talent comes ego, and ego ruins growth. So the veterans swear they'll never let their only son fall into that trap. Instead, they make a very responsible decision as parents not to spoil him. 11 years later, the Prince of Hell, Wolf, pulls up by the house. He knocks on the door, greets warmly, and says it's been a long time. Yuan, now older, rushes to the door with a big smile and calls him uncle. Grandma also welcomes Wolf and then begs him to check the state of their son's training. She admits that, as parents, they might be too biased, and they need an outsider's perspective on how strong the boy really is. Wolf agrees to observe, and moments later, on the training ground, he is blown away watching Yuan's magical display. Later at the house, over tea, the parents ask Wolf about Yuan's assessment, but Wolf struggles to find words to describe what he's seen. Wolf finally admits to the couple that their boy is nothing but a monster, and even as a Prince of Hell, the boy might beat him at full power. The mom agrees and then shares that ever since Yuan was born, he's lived in complete isolation and has never made any contact with the outside world. But the boy has always had a dream to become a knight. However, the parents confess that they're too scared to send him off to town. They argue that the reason is that the boy's fighting ability is still green and he isn't ready for the world. Wolf nearly spits out his drink, hearing that, as he can't believe the old heads are calling their overpowered son's skills green. Later that day, Wolf finally heads home, realizing the couple's isn't logical but just being overprotective of the boy. But a week later, he hears shocking news that Yuan has run away from home. When he rushes to the house, the couple shows him a letter Yuan has left behind, in which the boy apologizes to his parents for leaving home. In the letter, Yuan explains his reason for leaving. He says he's been thinking about his weakness and feels ashamed of his training results, believing he's far behind his mates. Also in the letter, Yuan confesses his dream to become a knight, but in his eyes he lacks the strength, so he decides to leave home to grow stronger. Realizing the urgency of the matter, Wolf reasons the boy might get lost, so he promises the oldies he'll help find their son. With that, he leaves the house, setting off to find Yuan, committing to track him down, teach him reality, and give him the proper training his parents couldn't. Meanwhile, Yuan continues his journey to town, completely unaware of the chaos at home. After coming down from the mountain, separating his house from the path to town, he reflects on his parents. He knows they're definitely worried by now and are probably reading the letter he had left behind. However, he promises himself he'll return once he gets stronger. After walking a short distance, Yuan pulls out his hand-drawn map and sets his course toward a town called Amstall. The distance is nearly 200 kilometers, but to him, it feels like a 30-minute jog, with his speed that's almost like that of a supercar. But then, something strange catches his eye. He looks up to the sky to see a massive flock of birds flying overhead in formation. Yuan wonders what the large group of creatures could be, but then he realizes these aren't ordinary birds at all. They look more like fallen angels. Meanwhile, elsewhere on the same plains, a unit of soldiers prepares for battle. Their commander, Eddie Mauvet, addresses his men, announcing that the great Holy Geely's empire has launched a massive summoning ritual just to assault their homeland. He reveals that what their enemies summoned are rank 8 angels numbering in the thousands. However, the commander steals his troops, saying that even though their force numbers only 200 and they're at an overwhelming disadvantage, they are strong warriors, and 1,000 angels are nothing to them. He assures his men that if each man claps 5 angels, they'll prevail, and the entire army, hyped up, responds with thunderous enthusiasm. As they ready for battle, the commander gives final orders. He commands the archers to move to the front lines, and if the enemy advances, they should let them experience a rain of arrows. But just then, the commander notices his vice seems hesitant and asks what the matter is. The vice commander explains that, although they are trained soldiers capable of fighting effectively against human beings and wouldn't lose, against these evil angels, who just one of them has taken down a dozen men in the past, they don't stand a chance. But the commander just laughs quietly and reminds his vice that every soldier already knows the risk. He points out that each soldier stands ready to die if it means protecting the things they hold dear. The battlefield grows tense as the evil angels gather in perfect formation above the soldiers, who stand ready even in the face of death. But seeing this, Commander Mauvet lowers his head. He realizes he is the one who lacks resolve while his troops have already accepted death. Ashamed, he apologizes, admits his earlier speech insults their bravery, and vows to take full responsibility to bring everyone home alive. But suddenly, a tiny voice interrupts. It's Yuan who steps forward and asks the commander the rank of the angels. Confused at the sight of a young boy, the commander turns and stammers, "Rank 8. Yuan then smiles casually, saying if that's the case, then there's no problem. Suddenly, the boy launches into the sky, leaving the commander in utter shock, watching the Yuan fly like an arrow into the heavens. Up above, Yuan soars calmly as memories of his childhood flood back. He recalls seeing one of these winged creatures with his mother before and then asks her about them. Picking up a stone, his mom calls them angels and then throws the stone with incredible force, brutally smashing the creature's head and then brushing it off as no different from striking down a crow. Yuan now understands they are bad birds, but when he asks why they are bad, the only thing she tells him is that they are astonishingly weak and far below their fighting might. She also claims that the waves emitted when unleashing fighting spirit is enough to wipe out the winged creatures. Back in the present, Yuan is relieved that the only danger he encounters on his journey is these weak birds, while the soldiers below panic, wondering if this strange boy is some hidden weapon. With a steady gaze, Yuan approaches the angel swarm, imagining that when his mom calls them bad birds, she means vermin that devastate human crops. Soaring into the midst of the swarm of birds, Yuan emits a bright light, ready to annihilate them in one strike. The evil birds scream in panic as an intense light bursts from the young man's body. Yuan's voice cuts through the chaos, declaring he must exterminate them, and then he unleashes the Supreme Ruler's limitless blade, creating a swirling vortex that tears through the sky and shreds countless angels instantly. Meanwhile, soldiers on the ground watch in shock as the heavens split apart. After the aerial destruction, Yuan drops to his knees and catches his breath. Everyone's left speechless, staring at a sea of evil bird corpses stretching endlessly across the battlefield. Commander Mauvet tries to speak, but he is too stunned to believe such power can exist in a human. But just then a new danger appears, a cloaked rank 3 throne demon who is impressed by Yuan's skills. The commander cries out, recognizing the unimaginable threat. When Yuan asks what the creature is, the commander, stunned that he doesn't know, explains that the throne demon is 3rd in the hierarchy of demons. He adds that a single throne holds the power of 20,000 angels. Hearing this, Yuan remembers a similar moment from his childhood. He recalls his mother teaching him how dangerous rank 1 seraphs are, and then warns him never to fight one alone without them. Nevertheless, she tells him that rank 2 and rank 3 demons should be pretty easy for him to handle solo. With this in mind, Yuan is confident he can defeat this throne and casually insults the demon, calling it a big bird, which infuriates it. but the commander panics and shouts to remind the boy that this enemy is rank 3. Even so, there's no fear in Yuan's eyes, only quiet curiosity. Enraged, the throne demon prepares to unleash his overwhelming power. He spreads his arms, and suddenly strange winged beasts called powers descend in terrifying numbers. Commander Movet freezes in shock at the sight of these beasts, whispering that these creatures surpass even rank 6. But in a split second, Yuan attacks, and in an instant, screams erupt as the powers are torn apart like paper. Blood splatters everywhere while the throne watches in shock as his servants get shredded one after another like weaklings. After the brutal attack, Yuan stands tall before the ranks of soldiers and calmly asks if they've ever heard of bird damage. Before anyone can answer, he explains loudly that it's when farmers worry about birds wrecking their crops. But the soldiers just blink, confused as to why the boy is dropping farming lessons in the middle of a bloodbath. Before anyone can even process his words, Yuan yells again, telling the throne he's sick of him popping up in villages and orders him to wrap it up and go home. But the throne just stares in dead silence, frozen in fear, wondering who the heck this boy really is and why even he can't track his attacks. Yuan loses patience at the throne's silence. He punches the ground, cracking it wide open, and then orders the demon to leave in peace. Staring at the massive crater from that single punch, the throne, terrified, immediately agrees to retreat. 200 soldiers watch in stunned silence, unable to believe what they've just witnessed. That day becomes history as the first sighting of the mysterious life form and its first defeat. But Yuan doesn't care about any of that. He just jogs off toward town, completely carefree. Before long, Yuan runs with heavy breaths, thinking about his parents. It's already been a week since he ran away from home, and so much has happened along the way. After running several miles, he finally arrives at his destination, the bustling city of Amstall, and the sight takes his breath away. Excited, he steps into the city, overwhelmed by the 3-story houses and the endless crowds. Wandering through the busy streets, he stops in front of a wall covered in notices. His eyes lock onto one poster in particular, an advert for the chivalric order enrollment exam. Sometime later at Amstall Castle Station, a female knight commander with a manly voice announces the start of the exam. She explains that it consists of 2 stages, a basic competence certification and a tournament battle. Meanwhile, Yuan, already signed up, listens carefully, determined to make the most of this opportunity. Soon after, the test begins, and the first trial is the 100-meter dash. As candidates line up on the field ready to run, the protagonist studies the length of the course, thinking it will be tough. But then memories of his strict training at home surface. He recalls his mother always made him run every day with 40 tons of weight balanced on his head. Suddenly, in the present, the announcer calls the next candidate, and it's Yuan. Yuan steps forward and readies himself for the running trial. As the instructor calls for the start, Yuan blasts forward at twice the speed of flash. In an instant, the ground erupts like a bomb has gone off, carving a massive crater that leaves everyone in shock. He finishes the race in milliseconds only to see the disaster he has left behind. Everyone panics, thinking World War III is about to start, but they are unable to see through the choking dust cloud. Meanwhile, Yuan, scratching his cheek awkwardly, informs the instructor he has already reached the goal, but she tells him to shut the heck up, since her focus is on the disaster that just occurred. Shortly afterward, once everything calms down, the instructor checks her stopwatch and sees that Yuan's finishing time is 15 seconds. Still, the ground is so wrecked they have to pause the exam just to level it. Next exam is the Shotput, and the instructor announces that each candidate gets 1 throw, which in the end will be recorded. The first to be called is a dude named Richard. Yuan stares nervously at the macho guy and realizes the dude is built nothing like an ordinary recruit. As the competition begins, the Hulk hurls the ball with terrifying force, smashing it across the field. The instructor, surprised, announces that his throw sets a new record, 120 meters, the highest ever recorded. Upon hearing this, the crowd erupts in cheers, praising Mr. Olympia as the greatest military expert in town. Then it's Yuan's turn and he quietly steps forward. But on his turn, the instructor gets all flirty with Richard and starts admiring his muscles, while Yuan gets ignored like pig's vomit. Feeling a little left out, Yuan shrugs and decides to throw the shot put himself. He winds up and casually launches it, but the ball vanishes into the sky, and a few seconds later, a massive explosion rocks the mountainside, shocking everyone into silence. The instructor, caught off guard, thinks it's just another random meteorite strike, completely missing what Yuan actually did. Then she turns and asks Yuan when he'll throw, but Yuan innocently replies that he already did. However, since no shot put is visible on the field, the instructor angrily scolds him and assumes he just fumbles and pockets the ball. So with no proof of his throw, Yuan is instantly given 0 points, despite leveling part of a mountain. With that, the exam then moves on to the final test, a crystal ball that reacts to magical power. Before commencing, the instructor explains that if a candidate touches the crystal and the flame inside lights up, the candidate passes, no matter how bad their physical results were. Yuan immediately approaches the instructor and asks the point of all the exams if the crystal's result disregards everything else. The instructor answers, explaining that this test is designed to find rare magical knights, warriors who wield both swords and magic. However, she adds that the hurdle is impossibly high, and even normal magic graduates can't spark it. Hearing that, Yuan instantly thinks there's no way an ordinary guy like him could ever pass a test like this. The instructor calls his name first, and he steps up, convinced he has already failed, but decides to try anyway. However, the second he places his hand on the crystal ball, it immediately explodes in a blinding burst of energy. Yuan stares in shock, while the instructor just stands there, stunned at the impossible result. The clueless crowd starts murmuring about one too many explosions going off and begins to suspect it isn't just a coincidence. But the instructor is deep in thought after what she has just witnessed. She glances at Yuan, wondering if all those blasts could actually be his doing. After a brief moment, she is convinced the boy is responsible. Right then, she suddenly clasps Yuan's hands, calls him an extraordinary rookie, and tells him to shock everyone in the final exam. Yuan, confused, blurts out about causing the crystal ball to explode, but the instructor eagerly waves it off, saying explosions count as fire, so it's basically a pass. Yuan can't believe it, but before he knows it, he is officially declared to have passed the first exam. Excited, he jumps for joy, screams in celebration, and then decides he'll do his best in the next stage too. Suddenly, a dude walks in, saying 16 candidates passed the exam. This douche face with a scarred eye is the commander of the chivalric order, and he is excited to see what kind of rookies will be enrolled. The instructor then informs him that among the candidates moving to the next stage is the strongest contender, Richard, a prized swordsman who stands out above the rest. Hearing this makes the commander laugh with growing excitement, already eager to train this year's batch. Next, the second exam is revealed to be a tournament battle, with the commander himself waiting to fight the champion at the end. Everyone expects Richard to dominate, including the commander, but when the matchups are drawn, Yuan is shocked to see that his very first opponent is Richard himself. The commander immediately protests, saying it's unfair since Yuan is just a small boy. But the vice commander only smirks, saying everyone will understand once they watch. With that, the arena opens for the David versus Goliath fight. Richard, towering and built like a monster, faces off against Yuan, but first, the big guy acknowledges Yuan for passing. However, he doubts the boy's strength, saying bullying the weak isn't knightly and goes against his chivalry code. Yuan is completely touched by Richard's impressive true spirit of chivalry. He has always dreamt of becoming a knight who defends the weak and crushes the strong, and as he looks at this muscled freak, he is convinced he is the perfect model of knighthood. Yuan clenches his fists as he thinks of the privilege to spar with someone greater than him. He is determined to lose bravely and use the defeat as fuel to grow stronger. However, he promises himself this will be the only time he loses. After that, he'll train to the death, temper his body and spirit, and come back even stronger. Without further waste of time, Richard sighs and promises to go easy on the lad. But first, he asks for a warm-up to see how the boy fights so he won't hurt him accidentally. This kindness only makes the boy admire him more. Fired up, Yuan bows respectfully, declaring he'll go all out and show this powerful man his full power. As the fight begins, Richard braces himself, only to freeze in shock seeing the boy move with impossible speed, splitting into multiple afterimages. Richard immediately recognizes this fighting technique. It's a ninja's shadow step, a rare skill feared for its deadly illusions. Most seasoned ninjas can barely create one shadow, while a genius might manage two. But Richard is about to pee hot urine when he sees 27 shadows of the boy swarming him at once. Suddenly, Yuan shouts as he goes for the attack, pouring everything into his ultimate strike. He punches the floor of the arena fiercely, and the ground explodes under the impact. Shockwaves rip across the arena, rocks shatter, and even the spectators are blown back in disbelief. When the dust clears, a massive crater is the only thing left where the stage once stood. Yuan stands nervously in the destroyed arena while everyone stares at him in fear. After witnessing the boy's full power, the big guy walks up with a shaky smile, barely keeping it together, and asks for his name. The moment Yuan tells him, Richard grabs his shoulder and immediately dumps the fate of the country in his hands. He looks at Yuan with teary eyes, admits defeat, and declares him the number one. On the other hand, the commander, realizing Yuan's power surpasses even his own, starts to panic, worried his reputation as the strongest knight will crumble if Yuan keeps rising. So he quickly hatches a plan to hand Yuan over to the newly formed magical chivalric order, making it look like he's the one who scouts the boy. In his mind, it's a perfect scheme. If Yuan becomes the strongest knight in history in the magical chivalric order, then he keeps his status as the unparalleled chivalric order commander. Back at the arena, just when one spineless contestant bows to Yuan and surrenders, Yuan is declared the winner again, making it his third straight victory, all by default. Internally, Yuan can't understand why his opponents keep surrendering without fighting. He's clueless to the fact that they're terrified of facing him after seeing his power. But he doesn't feel triumphant. Instead, he is frustrated, thinking they all see him as nothing but a wimpy weakling not worth their time. Desperate, he begs his opponents to take him seriously and fight him, even if his skills seem like cheap kiddie tricks to them, because all he ever wants is to prove himself as a knight. Frustrated, Yuan shouts with all his heart, begging the rest of the candidates to at least allow him to take the test properly. But the pathetic losers, scared out of their minds, look at each other, unsure of how to respond. Then suddenly they completely lose it, panicking and yelling they don't want the smoke. Some cry out for their mothers, while others surrender on the spot, admitting this feels nothing like a normal exam. Confused, Yuan watches them scatter, wondering if he's such a small fry that they hate him this much. But just then the chivalric order commander steps forward, all smiling, and asks Yuan not to bully the other candidates too much. Taken aback, Yuan stutters, trying to explain that it wasn't his intention, but the dude cuts him off and ends the exam right there, insisting he doesn't need to see any more. Yuan blinks, feeling bad that he won't even get a proper exam. Instead, the cunning commander announces he'll transfer him to the newly established magical chivalric order. Still, to Yuan, this feels like failure. He lowers his head, convinced he wasn't even worth testing. In his head, he thinks the commander knows he is jobless and lacks talent, so he's just acting out of pity to find a place of employment for him. But then, the boy gathers his resolve and makes one final request. Since the rules state that the winner should face the commander in a mock battle, Yuan asks not to be denied that chance. The commander looks puzzled, as Yuan admits that winning by default will leave him with regrets, so he needs to try hitting someone for real with his full power, even if it's just once. His desperation shocks both the commander and the candidates, who can't believe how seriously the boy is taking the exam, and then try to calm him down. But Yuan looks at his hand and says he won't feel satisfied unless he goes all out, body and soul. Realizing there's no stopping the boy, all the candidates immediately back away, saying they've already surrendered and want nothing to do with him. Pointing at the commander, one contestant tells Yuan that the guy is the greatest knight that ever lived. So Yuan turns to the commander and desperately requests a match against him, causing the commander to freak out. As if that isn't enough, all the candidates start chanting for the commander to engage the boy. But the commander, sweating bullets, immediately shouts at them to shut their worthless mouths, but no one listens. He desperately turns to the vice commander for backup, but the girl gives him a thumbs up, wishes him good luck, and then vanishes. The commander, shaking like a scared little girl, begs Yuan to wait, as he can already picture himself joining his ancestors any moment now. But the boy clenches his fists, his body sparking with raw energy as he lowers his stance like a predator about to pounce. Without warning, Yuan surges forward, charging straight at the commander. As Yuan launches a powerful punch, the commander stares at the incoming blow and freezes, convinced his time has finally come. So he shuts his eyes tight, ready to meet his maker. However, Yuan sees the commander's eyes squeezed shut in desperation and halts his attack, realizing the commander has no intention of fighting him after all. To him, it means he isn't good enough to see the commander's true strength, so he steps back. Instead of sulking, the boy accepts defeat and vows to refine himself even further. With renewed energy, he shouts that the exam had been incredibly meaningful, and then thanks the commander for coaching him. He promises to devote himself more, to grow from this failure, and then with a bright smile, he says he'll go see the strongest man in the world, the only person he knows who can guide him further. That said, Yuan bids farewell and runs off, leaving the commander standing there speechless with sweat running down his face. Watching Yuan disappear into the distance, he's left rattled, wondering who that absolute gigachad really is. Reflecting on the boy's insane strength, he compares it to the top-secret weapons of major countries, after which he concludes it would be a waste to keep such information to himself, since such power may become a worldwide sensation, and then plans to report it to the king. But before he can act, a chilling voice interrupts, ordering him not to speak a word about what happened. The commander snaps and angrily demands to know who would dare give him such an order. But as he turns, he freezes in shock. Wolf, the Prince of Hell himself, stands before him and casually says he's looking for Yuan, but once again the boy had slipped past him. The commander nearly pees himself, struggling to understand why the Prince of Hell is there. Wolf, however, calmly warns him not to breathe a word about Yuan to anyone and threatens to personally erase him if he does. The commander trembles at the threat, knowing Wolf isn't joking, and then stammers out his obedience, swearing to keep Yuan's secret safe. With that sorted out, Wolf asks the commander if he knows where Yuan had went off to. Panicking, the commander recalls Yuan's last words about going to see the world's strongest man, and then relays them to Wolf. Sometime later, at Yuan's parents' residence, the old sage fixes a sharp, angry gaze on Wolf, demanding to know why he had returned without their son. Terrified, Wolf quickly explains that when it comes to finding the world's strongest man, their residence is the only place worth checking. But Grandma quickly interrupts, reminding Wolf they've already told him that the boy isn't there. The mom adds that Yuan never thinks much of them. To him, they are just ordinary elders who dabble in martial arts and magic. The old man supports his wife, explaining they had no choice but to feed him those words so as not to spur his pride. But Wolf almost loses it hearing their silly excuses, and then shocks them by mentioning that their boy had already defeated a mountain of angels. Upon hearing this, the parents loses it and start arguing over whether the angels Yuan had encountered were rank 1 demons or not. On the other hand, Wolf is lost in thought, wondering who this strongest man Yuan had talked about could be, if not the old sage. Meanwhile, in a faraway land, a girl named Perrine, the daughter of a count, is captured as a slave and caged like an animal. Just a few days earlier, her father's estate was under attack by assassins, and all the knights protecting it were butchered one by one. Her father was also assassinated while she tried to escape with her servant, but the hitmen were too skilled, so no soul in the estate was spared. Only Perrine survived because the attackers were ordered to capture her alive as a slave. Now in the present, Perrine is locked behind iron bars, set to be sold off. She remembers her late father calling the attack a plot by the Holy Empire, but none of that matters anymore. Fighting tears, she blames herself for lacking the strength and courage to protect her family. But just then, she spots another prisoner, cloaked in a hood and carrying a sword despite being locked inside the cage. The hooded girl named Torrentia notices Perrine staring at her like a dummy and casually asks if she is interested in her sword. But Perrine returns the question, asking why Torrentia is locked in a cell, and then questioning if she is a noble's daughter like her. The hooded girl explains that, sadly, she is just a freelance adventurer hired to watch over the package inside this transport. Looking at the chains fastened to her hands, Perrine figures she is the package. Her sad reality hits as she realizes she is no longer seen as a person, but just an object to be sold at a high price. Torrentia confirms it without emotion, and then asks Perrine if she can also ask a question in return. Before Perrine can answer, Torrentia notices the calluses on her hands and guesses she's trained with the sword. Nervously, Perrine admits it, explaining that despite her timid looks, she once ranked in the top 8 of the Imperial Capital's female division. She adds that she was once praised as a prodigy, confident in her sword skills, yet fate still left her shackled in chains as a slave. Suddenly, Torrentia orders Perrine to move back as a voice from outside warns of danger. A burly rider on horseback informs Torrentia that they are being attacked by an assassin. The masked assassin immediately attacks the carriage with katana slashes, but Torrentia sweeps into action and intercepts the blows. In the process, her cloak falls away, revealing a girl with flowing white hair clad in sharp armor. Perrine stares in shock, realizing the mysterious cloaked girl is a warrior. Analyzing the threat, Torrentia turns to Perrine and urges her to leave the cage. She warns that if a magical attack hits while she's inside, she'll be completely helpless. Scared for her life, Perrine agrees and steps out, still bound in chains. Meanwhile, Torrentia sizes up the assassin and realizes he is no ordinary samurai. His movements radiate mastery. She asks if he belongs to an underground guild, and the masked assassin confirms it. He introduces himself as Tesai before charging forward at impeccable speed, declaring that his mission is to capture the chained girl. He unleashes a powerful slash, but Torrentia steps forward to shield Perrin and then remarks that she's heard the name Tesai before. She recalls that he is a vagabond with a bounty on his head, which Tesai confidently confirms, adding that all he seeks is to fight a worthy opponent. Emitting a blinding aura, Torrentia laughs and calls it a coincidence. She points her sword toward Tesai, admitting she has the same intent. The duel heats up under the moonlight, with Torrentia charging at Tesai while suggesting they treat it as practice. The swordsman agrees and then shifts into a traditional stance with his body glowing with a bright aura. Torrentia freezes in shock as she recognizes the technique immediately. Jaijin Ryu, a sword style from the east. But Tesai says his technique has gone beyond tradition, and his blade is no longer bound by form. As he attacks, Tesai brags that he has attained Menkyo Kaiden, the proof of complete mastery. But in the blink of an eye, Torrentia appears at his back and answers coldly that she too carries that title, but with something far deadlier. Tesai, stunned by how fast she had moved behind him, realizes it's a doppelganger decoy. So he swings his blade wildly, but Torrentia slips past with ease, reminding him how many times he's been caught off guard. Tesai immediately breaks into a cold sweat, but Torrentia points out that if she had wanted him dead, he would have fallen 10 times already. Desperate, Tesai lashes out once more, but Torrentia knocks his sword aside and challenges him to show his true power. Desperate, the masked assassin charges with his blade, but Torrentia cuts him off, sharply reminding him that he's far too slow. With one clean slash, she severs his head and sends it flying into the night. From the shadows, the slave girl trembles, realizing Torrentia isn't just strong, she's on a completely different level. The slave merchant then steps out of hiding, grinning in excitement, and praises Torrentia's skill, saying he's glad he hired her. Even he is stunned at how easily she crushed the so-called underground big-shot samurai without breaking a sweat. But Torrentia brushes it off, saying the man's technique was sharp, yet nothing compared to her own. The merchant agrees, convinced there is no other human alive who can match her. Still, he acknowledges that the assassin's blade is sharp indeed. Picking it up, he remarks that normally items seized during a quest belong to the quest giver. However, he offers to hand the sword over to Torrentia as a reward. Torrentia calmly accepts it, but instead of keeping it, she hands the blade to the trembling slave girl, shocking her. With the sword in hand, Torrentia tells Perrin to choose. Perrin freezes, unable to believe what's happening. Torrentia presses harder, demanding she choose either to obey or to resist. Perrin stares in shock, unable to move, as Torrentia insists that her calloused hands already know the way of the sword. Then Torrentia warns that if Perrin chooses the path of survival as a slave without ever fighting, she might as well be dead. Hearing this, Perrin's thoughts race. If she picks up the blade, she might win her freedom, but only through a fight. She remembers her late father, who fought to the bitter end even when their home was destroyed. Now under the moonlight, Perrin stands trembling, her hand fidgeting as she struggles with her decision. Finally, Perrin steals her resolve. Gripping the sword tightly, she declares that, just like her father, she too will fight. Seeing her determination, Torrentia smiles faintly, satisfied with her courage. She tells Perrin she has lived up to expectations, but warns that the path ahead won't be easy. Suddenly, Torrentia raises her sword and charges at Perrin with full force. Perrin, stunned, braces herself for the attack, but Torrentia's speed is overwhelming. However, before the strike can land, the merchant behind her suddenly gets stabbed in the back instead. Shocked, Perrin pauses to understand what just happened. As Torrentia pulls back her blade, the merchant collapses, blood spilling from his wound. With his last breath, the confused merchant turns and demands to know why Torrentia had betrayed him. But she coldly explains that he brought it upon himself by selling humans like objects. Turning back to Perrin, Torrentia acknowledges her strong will and then breaks the slave contract chains on her neck, declaring her free. With a warm smile, she hands Perrin back the blade and tells her to enjoy her freedom. Torrentia then bids her farewell, but as she begins to walk away, Perrin, overwhelmed with emotion, calls out to her, begging her to wait. Fighting back tears, she bows deeply and thanks Torrentia. In turn, Torrentia apologizes for trying to scare her before and suggests they start anew. First, Torrentia corrects herself and reveals she isn't a samurai at all. Smiling proudly, she introduces herself as the hero. Perrin is left speechless, thinking about it. As Torrentia walks away under the starlit sky, Perrin remembers she's only heard about the heroes in fairy tales. But in truth, these are legendary humans chosen by the gods to fight demons strong enough to shake the world. Perrin can't help but admire how Torrentia is strong, kind, and confident, just like the perfect hero. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, our boy trudges along the path with his backpack slung over his shoulders, heading to meet the world's strongest man. He is clearly exhausted, but before he can rest, one big ferocious bear lunges from behind. Without even turning, the boy clenches his fist and slams it into the beast's head, dropping it instantly. But more bears keep appearing, frustrating him. He complains that they can't just sit quietly and let him pass, before taking them all down with ease by hurling stones. Following that, Yuan notices something unsettling. The forest is crawling with far too many bears. As he puzzles over it, a group of travelers suddenly arrives and warn him to get out immediately, shouting that magic bears have been spotted in the area. After which, Yuan watches as they hurry off with their carts, confused at their urgency. Nevertheless, he chooses to continue his journey. On the way, he is shocked to find the ground torn up and littered with the footprints of bears, but something feels off. These footprints are larger, heavier, and slightly different. Yuan wonders if the bears were the reason the villagers fled in such a rush, carts piled with crops they couldn't carry. So he clenches his fists and decides to help. If exterminating pests like bears is the work of good children, then this is his chance. With fiery eyes, Yuan pumps himself up, realizing that not only will exterminating the bears help the villagers, it will also serve as training. Determined, he rushes toward the trail of footprints, promising to give it his all. But at that moment, Yuan has no idea what he's walking into. It is revealed that disaster-level demons are a group of creatures once summoned from the demon world and used specifically for war. However, summoning them often spiraled out of control, throwing the world into chaos until this forbidden art was sealed away and nearly forgotten. Meanwhile, at the Adventurers Guild in the nearest town, Torrentia receives a troubling request. The subjugation of demonic magic bears terrorizing a nearby village. The guild master explains that even the knights have refused to help, claiming the monster is as strong as a demon. Despite the risks, Torrentia accepts without hesitation, declaring that her resolve to defeat demons is the very reason she became an adventurer. Back in the forest, the travelers from earlier hide in terror as the enormous great king of the bears approaches. Since their village was near the bears' den, their plan was to escape to a safer town, but now they face an even deadlier threat. Panic turns to despair as the monster's suffocating presence looms over them. Then, in a blink, the beast vanishes from sight. The travelers, believing it gone, hurriedly gather their luggage to flee the forest at once. But just as they prepare to leave, the massive bear reappears before them. In a deep, rumbling voice, it mocks them, asking if they were truly dumb enough to think he had left. The travelers freeze in shock, not only at his sudden return, but at the realization that the monster can speak human language. The monstrous bear sneers, calling them useless goblins and insignificant fools, before introducing himself as the demon beast king of the disaster level. The travelers tremble in horror, recalling the old tales, stories of the demon beast king who once slaughtered thousands of knights in an instant and plunged the world into fear. Meanwhile, Yuan eventually stumbles upon a pile of dead devil bears. Looking ahead, he spots the demon beast king with lightning cracking its massive body. He immediately figures that this beast must be responsible for the carnage, and the villagers will have a tough time dealing with it. So without fear, the boy walks toward the towering beast and politely asks for a favor. He wants the demon beast king to leave the forest. Torrentia, who just getting there had already been defeated by the monster, stares in disbelief at the nonsense she just heard. She immediately curses at Yuan, calling him an idiot and demanding he run while his head is still attached to his neck. But the demon beast king is already provoked by Yuan's words, surprised that a human would dare speak without an ounce of fear. As the monster growls in anger, Torrentia trembles in fear, thinking they are done for. But suddenly, she notices Yuan radiating an intense, dazzling aura. Her eyes widen in shock as she immediately recognizes this power. It's the seven-colored fighting spirit, something she thought impossible. It is said that the fighting spirit is divided into 7 parts: dragon, holy, evil, wizard, divine, lightning, and martial arts. To wield even a few at once is rare, and to channel all 7 is said to be impossible, a burden no human body could withstand. Very few throughout history had ever achieved such a feat, and those who did were known as the Divine Warriors. Seeing Yuan radiating all 7 spirits at once, the colossal monster snarls, recognizing the legendary Divine Warrior aura before him. The monster then looms close, demanding to know who this brat really is. but Yuan doesn't bother to answer. Instead, he charges straight at the beast, leaping high with a fist that shines brighter than the stars, and then launches a powerful punch that tears through the monster's colossal frame, making it roar in agony. A massive shockwave blasts across the battlefield, and in an instant, the once feared demon beast king vanishes like it never existed. The villagers watch in awe at the strange, glowing aftermath that still lingers in the sky. As the dust settles, Yuan drops to the ground in heroic fashion and immediately rushes to check if Torrentia is okay. Stepping closer, he places his hand on her, and suddenly Torrentia begins to glow with a brilliant light. When the light fades, Torrentia gasps in shock, realizing every wound on her body has mysteriously healed. Staring at Yuan like he isn't even human, she finds it impossible to believe that not only does the guy fight with overwhelming martial skill, he can also use magic. Filled with admiration, Torrentia bows low, slamming her forehead to the ground and introduces herself as the hero. After that, she cries out and begs Yuan to make her his disciple. The forest falls silent as Yuan just stands there, looking at her, dumbfounded. Suddenly, he recalls Torrentia introducing herself as a hero and becomes uneasy. A flashback takes him 2 years back. Yuan remembers his old man once asking if he knew of the hero clan. When he admitted he didn't, his father explained, comparing heroes to towering mountains. To prove his point, the old sage unleashed his terrifying spell, Nuclear Burst, on a nearby mountain, and in a single strike, the entire mountain was reduced to dust. With this demonstration, the old man explained what it means to be a hero. A hero, he said, is someone with a body that can be both strong and weak depending on the situation. Then he gave Yuan a warning. He tells him that people who call themselves heroes are often unreliable, weaker than they seem, and dangerous to trust. He cautioned Yuan not to be deceived by them and never allow the so-called heroes to take advantage of his kindness. Back in the present, Yuan's face twists in panic, realizing he has accidentally run into a hero. Unable to control his emotions, our boy bolts, screaming that his father warned him never to get involved with one. Torrentia is left flustered by his unexpected reaction, but the crazy girl still chases after him, apologizing for asking so suddenly to be his disciple. She insists she absolutely needs to get stronger, no matter what it takes. The two continue running through the forest like they're in a toxic relationship until Torrentia trips and crashes to the ground. Yuan then stops, sighs in exhaustion, and demands to know why she is so insistent on becoming stronger. Catching her breath, Torrentia becomes emotional and finally reveals her reason. She says her clan was destroyed for a certain cause, and because of that, their pride was dragged through the mud while people mocked them behind their backs. As she speaks, Yuan guesses the destruction of her clan must be tied to their situationally strong yet weak body condition. However, with a vengeful expression, Torrentia vows to grow stronger and erase the dishonor from her clan's name. Yuan, on the other hand, listens quietly, torn between his father's warnings and Torrentia's heartfelt resolve. He recalls how, all his life, he too had wanted to grow stronger so he could fulfill his dream of becoming a knight, and listening to Torrentia's speech about strength resonates with him deeply. Just then, a traveler calls out to them, warning not to continue forward. When Yuan asks why, the man explains that a deadly outbreak known as the Janus Cold has already taken the lives of a third of the villagers up ahead. After the traveler leaves, Yuan admits he has never even heard of this strange disease. Torrentia then explains that it is a terrifying disease with symptoms ranging from high fever, violent coughing, and red spots that eventually lead to death. She adds that the disease often occurs in villages near dragon nests, and survival chances are barely 1 or 2 in 10. Hearing this, Yuan recalls a past experience. When he was younger, he once ventured into a nest of monitor lizards in the mountains, only to fall ill with severe fever and red spots later that day. But by the next morning, after a night's sleep, the sickness was gone. In the present, Yuan brushes it off as just a normal cold. But Torrentia insists the villagers need a magician, no, an upper-class sage to heal them. Yuan finds it hard to believe people could die from what he thinks of as a simple cold. Rushing forward, he tells Torrentia he can't just ignore people suffering from something like that. While running, he recalls his parents telling him as a boy that sickness fades with sleep. But this time, lives are at stake, and he refuses to stand by when his magic can at least cure a cold. Meanwhile, in the nearby village, a young girl tends to her sick brother who suffers in agony. Terrified, she watches him die slowly while helplessly praying to the heavens to either save him or grant her the strength to bear the loss. But suddenly, Yuan bursts into the room, glowing like the sun. With radiant hands, he casts the spell, perfect clear. A blinding light floods the room and the girl gasps, seeing the red spots vanish from her brother's skin like they were never there. Torrentia, arriving just behind, stops in shock at the miracle. She cannot believe Yuan has just cast Sage-class recovery magic. Only now does it confirm her inner suspicion that the boy is far from ordinary. This made her resolve hardens to make him her master, no matter what. A few minutes later, Yuan steps outside and, with a smile, announces that the whole village is cured. The once sick villagers stare in awe, speechless at their mysterious savior. Though they try to shower him with gratitude, Yuan only tells them to take care of themselves before taking off again. Running through the forest, Yuan breathes in relief, thanking God that everyone was saved. But suddenly, a familiar voice calls out from behind. It's Torrentia, still chasing, yelling that she hasn't given up on becoming his disciple. Yuan freezes, stunned by her persistence. But then Yuan admits something that has been bothering him. He says he watched her fight with the colossal bear and noticed she used only one technique, the holy fighting spirit, and then asks if that was truly her best. Embarrassed, Torrentia nods, admitting it was. Hearing this, Yuan is shocked. He realizes her body is strong but unstable, allowing her to release only one type of fighting spirit. Still, he is deeply impressed that, despite such limitations, Torrentia refuses to quit and pushes forward to grow stronger. Looking her in the eyes, Yuan admits that neither of them is normal, and in that they are alike. With that, he agrees to take her as his disciple, saying that since they both have their hurdles to overcome, they'll face them together. Torrentia is left speechless. Overcome with joy, she throws herself at him in a hug, beaming with excitement as she calls him master. Yuan begs her not to call him that, but she refuses, insisting he is her master no matter what. As they continue walking, Torrentia asks where they are headed exactly. Yuan looks ahead with confidence and answers. Sage Malik, and then explains that Malik is the strongest person he knows. Torrentia listens quietly, shocked to hear her overpowered master calling another man the strongest, and wonders what kind of person this sage could be. Meanwhile, Yuan drifts into another memory. His old man had once told him of a man he taught long before Yuan was born. A man named Malik, who later became a splendid sage through his own hard work. Finally, before long, the two travelers arrive at the edge of a vast sea where Yuan points across, revealing that Malik lies deep within the mountains on the other side. Several hours later, Yuan finally arrives at the mountain, with Torrentia following right behind, and cheerfully introduces himself with a smile to the blonde sage named Malik. Malik, however, is caught off guard. He looks at them in surprise, wondering what on earth the two youngsters are doing this deep in the mountains. Moments later, as the three of them sit together over tea, Yuan thanks Malik for the hospitality, while Malik eyes them both with suspicion, wondering what these young ones want from him. Curious, he addresses them directly, calling Yuan by name, acknowledging Torrentia as his so-called disciple, and bluntly asking what business they have with an old, half-retired sage like him. But while Malik tries to maintain composure, something about Yuan's appearance catches his eye. Narrowing his gaze, Malik feels like the boy's eyes remind him of his old master, the great sage. For a moment, Malik wonders if Yuan is somehow connected to the old couple, but he brushes the thought aside. Yuan, meanwhile, politely apologizes for intruding and finally reveals his true purpose. He says he wants to get stronger so he can become a knight. He explains that he failed the knight's entrance exam and has been reflecting on it ever since. He adds that since Malik trained under his father for half a year and became a sage afterward, he wants to be trained by him. Malik listens in silence as Yuan continues. The boy explains that at times his parents' training felt too soft. For instance, Yuan casually describes being skewered by an iron maiden as if it were nothing, and then mentions Bungee jumping off a 100-meter waterfall without a rope every single day to sharpen his survival instincts. Then, out of nowhere, Yuan unleashes a nuclear burst spell, Nelling blowing the place apart. Malik instantly recognizes it as the same ultimate magic his own master once used, confirming his suspicion that this boy has to be the son of the legendary couple. Impressed by his abilities, Torrentia comments that Yuan's father must have been a great man to have trained such a powerful sage like Malik. But Yuan denies it, claiming his father was just a normal man good with magic. Malik sweats as he watches them, realizing the boy has been completely brainwashed into believing his father was weak, when in truth, Yuan is already far stronger than Malik ever was. Malik recalls that his own training under the great sage only lasted 6 months before he nearly died and ran for his life. Meanwhile, this boy has endured it since birth, which terrifies him. The thought of guiding such a monstrous child makes Malik panic. He tries to refuse, telling Yuan he is already strong enough, but Yuan calls his bluff, insisting Malik is just being humble. Frustrated, Malik yells that Yuan is already invincible and doesn't need training. But Yuan clenches his fists in desperation, begging to be taken seriously. Meanwhile, Torrentia still can't understand how Yuan survived such training. She brings up the skewering incident and asks how he healed his injuries. To demonstrate, Yuan casually slices off his finger with dimension edge and instantly heals it with perfect heal. Malik, seeing this, can only gape in horror at the sight of the supposed weak boy wielding godlike magic as if it were nothing. When Torrentia asks Malik if he can also do such magic, the sage nearly faints, shouting that he can't. But Yuan just smiles, insisting Malik is being humble again. After several failed attempts to convince Yuan otherwise, Malik sighs and finally gives in. If it were up to him, he would just enjoy his retirement in peace. But remembering the debt he owes the great sage, Malik reconsiders. Memories of his own past returns of how he had been only slightly above average at the academy until the old sage saw potential in him, praised his determination, and offered to train him. Though the training was pure hell and nearly took his life, he came out stronger. In just 6 months, he returned to the academy and could already cast sage-class spells like simultaneous magic activation, something even top scholars struggled with. Now, in the present, Malik looks at Yuan and makes a decision. He admits he's retired from Magic Society, but instead of training him personally, he suggests Yuan enroll in the Magic Academy. The idea shocks the boy, but Malik explains it's the best place to polish his talents and assures him that unlike the night school, he has connections that will guarantee his entry. Thinking to himself, Malik knows there's no changing Yuan's brainwashed mindset, but he's certain the academy will open his eyes to how different he truly is. After considering it, Yuan lights up, excited by the idea of studying at a real institution. When he worries about Torrentia, she instantly declares she'll follow him anywhere as his #1 disciple. With that settled, Malik promises to prepare their recommendation letters and advises them to rest for the night before heading out the next morning. But Malik still worries about how they'll reach the capital. The only route back is across the ocean, which is swarming with krakens. When he asks how they even managed to cross the ocean while coming, Yuan casually explains that he just stepped forward again and again until he ran across the sea like it was nothing. Malik nearly suffers a heart attack, realizing this is the second absurd thing he's heard that day. The next day, training resumes as Torrentia charges with her sword, but Malik, watching at the side, is stunned by the intensity. The speed is too much for him to follow, yet what shocks him most is Yuan. The boy evades every strike flawlessly with his eyes closed. At the training ground, Torrentia unleashes her aura, firing powerful spells, sword arts, and deadly moves, but Yuan dodges them all with ease, leaving Malik in disbelief. After the duel, Yuan calls Torrentia over and asks why she is fighting that way if her goal is to get stronger. He reminds her that training isn't about releasing aura, then demonstrates by summoning massive magical circles across the sky. Realizing she overdid it, Torrentia apologizes and admits she only wanted to push him to open his eyes. But when Yuan praises her improvement compared to before, Torrentia's mood flips instantly. Her eyes sparkle like a child being praised for the first time, and she vows to work even harder. Off to the side, Malik is left speechless, wondering what kind of monsters he's about to unleash on the academy. Later that evening, Yuan and Torrentia thank Malik for his help and depart for the academy. Meanwhile, far away at a certain mountain, A group of adventurers watch a fading barrier and their leader, Gilmina's, warns it could collapse at any moment. This isn't just any place, it's the rumored base of the forbidden alchemist where massive summoning circles glow within, trapping countless undead. Gilmina's cautions that if the barrier breaks, nearby towns will be swallowed by death, and even for an A-rank party like them, it will be hard to stop it. Worst case scenario, they could end up as undead themselves. That said, he asks if anyone wants to leave, but his companions scoff. Riane, the mage, steps forward with a smile, reminding him they've always overcome everything together. She says they trust his lead and will stick with him even with death looming, and their determination leaves Gilmina's stunned. Suddenly, Riane shouts for Gilmina's to look behind. Gilmina's turns and sees the barrier cracking, the undead roaring as the seal shatters. Quickly, he rallies his party, and they all pumped with adrenaline, grinning through their fear. As the undead swarm, Gilmina's yells for everyone to move. But before they can, a blazing torrent of black fire crashes through the horde, incinerating everything. The adventurers freeze in shock. Unbeknownst to them, not far away, Yuan had casually cast Hell Flame during practice with Torrentia. This spell never fades until it collides with something solid, and Yuan nervously hopes it only hit harmless ground in the mountains. Meanwhile, the adventurers stare in disbelief as the undead army is reduced to ash in seconds, and the battlefield transformed into a massive crater. 2 days pass since Yuan and Torrentia left Malik behind. They still have some distance to cover before reaching the Magic Academy, so they stop in a nearby port city to rest at an inn. But the moment they arrive, something feels off. The streets are empty, and when they enter the inn, silence greets them with not a single person is in sight. They call out, but no one answers as the building feels abandoned, and even outside the other inns look completely run down. Just as they begin to wonder if they've wandered into a ghost town, a fiery little girl pops out of nowhere, yelling at them for calling the place run down. The girl, Linda, insists their inn isn't like any other, saying it's a proud establishment with over 300 years of history. All Yuan wants is a room for the night, but before he can approach the counter, the little firecracker doubles down, boasting about heroes and even a legendary knight staying there in the past. Suddenly, Linda's mom rushes in, apologizing like her life depends on it. The moment Linda sees her, she bolts, refusing to hear any correction. Turning to Yuan and Torrentia, the mother apologizes again, explaining that her daughter lacks common sense and experience but was thrown at the front desk because the inn is short on staff. She adds that the shortage is due to a recent recession, which has left the entire town struggling. Shortly afterward, Yuan and Torrentia settle into the inn to rest. But the little menace unexpectedly shows up again, announcing that she'll be busy for a while and needs them to take care of her rabbit. At first, Yuan and Torrentia are stunned by her audacity, but they eventually agree and demands to know what the issue is. With a heavy sigh, Linda reveals the truth. The inn's business is failing badly and sales have dropped year after year. She explains that the inn used to thrive when legendary heroes stayed there, but times have changed, and old fame no longer brings customers. So she came up with a new plan to attract people with hot springs. Furthermore, she mentions that a hot spring source was once discovered in a nearby forest. However, the project was abandoned for unknown reasons, but the spring still exists. She declares that the next morning she'll head to the forest to revive the idea, and until then, Yuan and Torrentia must watch her rabbit. Yuan hesitates, warning that the forest is dangerous and full of beasts, but Linda brushes it off, insisting it's safe now. When Torrentia asks if she's discussed this with her mom, Linda stiffens, admits she hasn't, then angrily promises she'll start sharing her future plans from now on. Yuan pushes her to reconsider her bird brain plan, but the little brat lashes out, saying she'll find someone else to take care of her rabbit. Just as things heat up, Torrentia suddenly leaps up, praising Linda's determination and calling her a genius. She declares that she's moved by Linda's wonderful spirit to save her family's inn and promises to help her with all her strength, leaving everyone dumbfounded by her sudden change in character. As Linda leaves to prepare for her expedition, Torrentia becomes completely obsessed with the rabbit. She squeals about how cute it is while trying to hold it. The rabbit scratches, bites, and bolts around the room, causing chaos. But instead of being upset, Torrentia just laughs like she's in heaven. By morning, Torrentia looks worn out but finally wins the rabbit's trust, proudly holding it in her arms. Yuan notices this is the first time he's seen her genuinely happy instead of hiding behind her strong front. He finds this softer side of her refreshing and kind of cute. But his thoughts soon turn to Linda. She went into the forest to dig for hot springs but hasn't returned, even though it's already past noon. Worried, he considers checking on her. Meanwhile, in the forest, Linda struggles underground trying to dig. The work is harder than she expected, and the rock won't give way, even with magic. She realizes this must be why the plan was abandoned in the past. In a flashback, she remembers the townsfolk mocking the inn a few months earlier, saying it was only a matter of time before it closed. Back in the present, Linda clenches her fists. She refuses to accept that the inn will disappear. She remembers her ancestors, who once supported heroes, and vows to protect her family's business no matter what. But just as she steals her resolve, something rustles nearby. Linda then turns and finds herself surrounded by massive bear monsters closing in from every direction. Her eyes widen in horror as she realizes they're demonic beasts. Panic sets in as she stumbles back, whispering that she doesn't want to die before crying out desperately for help. Luckily for her, Yuan and Torrentia burst onto the scene at the perfect time. Linda's face lights up in relief seeing Yuan battle the beasts. She watches in awe as his strength and aura resemble the legendary knight from the old stories. But while she's lost in her fantasy, one beast charges right at Linda. Torrentia reacts instantly, scooping her up as Yuan smashes the monster with a punch so devastating it feels like 1,000 Mike Tysons striking at once and obliterated the beast instantly. With the threat cleared, Yuan checks if Linda is okay. She weakly manages to answer, but before anyone can relax, the ground rumbles. The earth shakes like an earthquake, shocking everyone. Suddenly, the ground bursts open and a massive geyser shoots into the sky. Everyone stares in shock as steaming water erupts, revealing a newly formed hot spring. Days later, the inn is back to life. Inside, Wolf, still tracking Yuan's movements, finishes his meal, satisfied with the food and the inn's clean, welcoming service. He even enjoys the outdoor bath, relaxing more than he has in ages. Before leaving, the demon prince asks the innkeeper, Linda's mom, to treat any guests he refers kindly since he's fairly well known. The innkeeper agrees with a smile, assuring him they always serve their customers with care. Linda overhears and can't help but smirk proudly, happy to have kept the business afloat. Soon, the inn grows livelier, even attracting demon clientele, and the port city slowly regains its bustling life. But far away in a secret facility, news arrives that the Bear Emperor has been slain. A masked messenger reports to his master that the culprits remain unclear, though rumors claim a hero's descendant was behind it. The messenger adds, however, that among the calamities they possess, the Bear Emperor was only the weakest and vows they'll exercise caution before releasing the rest. In the shadows, their leader, bearing a striking resemblance to the old sage, gives his command. Until he finishes summoning the great demon god Beelzebub, all others are to be kept away from the mansion. Will Yuan make it to the Magic Academy with danger lurking on every side? Comment Inferior Knight if you're hyped to see what happens next in Part 2. If you enjoyed this video, drop a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe for more awesome content. Thanks for watching, as always.